50-year retrospective commitment to vision. My name is Mike Fisher, and I am the exhibits coordinator here at the Maud Kearns Art Center. We are thrilled to have our panel of photography at Oregon representatives with us this evening. So what we'll do is I'll be turning it over to the panel. They'll be discussing, talking about the exhibit, talking about the pieces, photography at Oregon, their inspiration, their commitment. And then after that, we'll be opening it up to some Q&A. So if you have questions throughout there, you will have the opportunity to ask the panelists. And then at the very end, I invite all of you to stay, look at the artwork, enjoy some more refreshments, and feel free to ask more questions about the exhibit that you're going to see tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to SUSIE MORRILL. SUSIE is the chair of photography at Oregon, and she is the one who spearheaded the efforts of the organization to put on this amazing exhibit. And I want to start off by a round of applause for SUSIE and all of their amazing work to put on this fantastic show.
So thanks for coming. This show was a huge commitment for sure. We've had over 300 people show in the gallery over the 50 years. 67 of them have passed away. 2 of them passed away while we were trying to get the show together. It was, data mining, trying to find these people, and we borrowed pieces from permanent collections from big collectors to fill in gaps and get represented as far as famous photographers, which was really wonderful. And then we did get good response from people around the country who fondly remembered our gallery group and had shown in influential times for themselves. For instance, Roseanne Olson drove all the way from Seattle for the opening and met up with all her old friends from Eugene and had a wonderful visit. And it's just a kind of a renaissance time for people to remember. We've been around a long time, 50 years, and we've been committed to showing fine art photography the whole time. We are a volunteer committee. Nobody gets paid a cent. It is a huge labor of love, and we have done it selflessly for many, many, many years. And both Paul Neville and David Turner were involved with photography at Oregon almost at the beginning, like 1 year off or something. It started in '66.
See, I was a kid.
Really close.
Yeah,
And George Beltran was really in it from the absolute beginning. He was really close friends with Bernie Freemesser, as were these other guys as well. And I can't even believe it. They've been involved for 50 years. That is just really amazing. So David has written an absolutely eloquent preface for our catalog, which is being produced. It'll be available online, digitally, and then print on demand if people are interested. It'll be done in just the next little bit. He really spoke eloquently about the importance of having a dedicated space to go and savor fine photography. To be able to sit there and really be with the work and contemplate the significance of the vision of the artist and the presentation and just the entire effort and commitment to what they were really trying to express. And that's harder and harder to find. You know, in this day and age, so many things have gone digital. We're barraged with technology and media, and to have that dedicated space for fine art photography is very rare. So we'd like to keep going with it, and we'd like to speak a little bit about our history tonight. David?
Okay. So I came to the University of Oregon in 1971. I came here from Texas as a business school graduate down there, and I came out here to get an art history degree. And I came out here mainly because there was no out-of-state tuition charged from people far away. So it was a good, cheap school, but it had a good art history program. But I came out here, I remember talking to Marion Ross, the head of that department for a long time, really into architecture, and he said, well, what are you really interested in? I want to find out who to line you up with. And I said, well, I really like 20th century art, and I really like photography. He said, photography, why are you at the University of Oregon? Because the art department had no photography program in 1970. the only way you could take a photography class was go to the journalism school and take a class with either Bernie Freemesser or George Beltran was the teacher there too. So
I took it from Bernie.
Before I found Bernie, I remember in one of my art history classes, they said, well, you've got to go over to the museum and look at the Gertrude Bass Warner collection of Asian prints there. And I was upstairs in this kind of old room, and I didn't find much interest down there, but as I got to another space, I found this little gallery tucked under the stairway in the main kind of big shoebox space of the art museum. And it was a dark space. It had gray walls, about zone 5, felt on the wall, and the walls were just 4 feet tall. You couldn't have any prints bigger than 4 feet because they were made with plywood. And the back was the back of the walls and the ceiling were all black. And each print had, instead of having nice gallery lights like this, each print had a little high intensor desk lamp tacked to the wall, and it was, beautiful bright light right on the print with a big shadow right next to it. And I think there was a red carpet. I remember a red carpet in there. Does that sound right? Yeah. So anyway, going into that room, just it was a whole different spot, and you could look at things really seriously, and everything stood out as a unique individual print there. And so right after that, I went over to Bernie's office to go see how this was put together. And he told me this was put together by this group we just organized a few years back, Photography at Oregon, and it's really volunteer run, and we're looking for help to do that. So I immediately signed up and said I'd love to work on this too. And I found it a great piece for me, because I wanted to go into the museum field. And a great piece for me was kind of figuring out how the prints got selected to be in the exhibition schedule. Then they got shipped here. These prints were all shipped matted and in plastic bags that everybody used to have their prints in. And we would take them out, and we had a big stack of plain raw glass, and we would put them up with a perfect invention. They were called L nails. And you just put them in the wall, and that hung the glass up there, so you could put things on the walls. Within about 2 hours, you could hang a show, it seemed like. And, to kind of become totally involved with the exhibition process was just thrilling for me, and it just made it so accessible. And then kind of lo and behold, I went off and got jobs in art museums for the next 30 years. And my last museum job was here at the University of Oregon. And I came here in about 2003 when there was a big hole there on campus. They had just started the excavation for the renovation. And by the time it opened in, I think, 2005, I made sure that there was still Photography at Oregon in the program there. I found out that I was fighting against a big group of people who were not so interested. First of all, they didn't save a space for photography anymore. But we had some nice hallways that we could kind of make do with. And so for the first 4 years, we had Photography at Oregon back in the museum, and it felt really good to be part of the group again and kind of see it going strong. But then after I finally retired, then it disappeared totally, and we kind of lost track of all the collections work that the museum, that the PAO had put into the museum there. Just lost track of the numbers and the artists. I'm sure they're in the collection there. So another piece I wanted to just bring up here is the kind of fascination that this organization had this fluidity about it, that different volunteers would come in and work real hard. Some people like SUSIE and Paul and George were kind of the good stalwarts there. But they always kind of rebounded, and if something went wrong, they figured out some solutions. So after they lost their spot at the museum, SUSIE particularly started saying, well, we can float around and start having shows just like we had in the past, in different spots in Eugene and Springfield. The Emerald Arts Center was real generous to us, a while back, and let us show there. Dot Dotson's, it's been a good place. And I think it's just great that Maud Kearns now has kind of welcomed this group and given this chance for original photographs to be seen here in Eugene, because to me that's the crux of this organization, to bring great original prints by both young people and established people, and being able to see them in our neighborhood down here. So that's kind of my piece right now. Maybe I'll chime in after a while.
Yeah.
Well, I second everything David said. George? Well, I came out here one year earlier. I was actually born with photography in my DNA. My grandfather was a small-town photographer in Wisconsin. From the turn of the 20th century, or actually before the turn of the 20th century, and he was the town photographer. He was taking graduation pictures, wedding pictures, photographing around the town, records, everything there was. But my photography genes didn't surface until I was in college. That was the University of Wisconsin. And I went to we didn't have internet back in those days, at least where I was. So I went to the public library and I read every book I could find on photography. This was before I even had a camera. And when I graduated, I used funds that people gave me to buy my first camera. And pretty soon I had photographs out on the street in little art sales. I think my prices were between $1 and $15. But one time I made $200 in a day. So I must have sold a lot of them. Eventually, I wanted to study photography, so I wrote around to various colleges that had photography programs. There weren't that many back in that day. And the only person that wrote me back a full-page handwritten reply was Bernie Freemesser. And, I always had a sort of a romantic feeling about the West anyway, so this is where I came. And I was already a graduate student, so I got right into Bernie's Tuesday night seminar that he held at his home. And I was often the person that stayed behind in class and stayed up till 2 o'clock with Bernie while he kept performing his rap. Or kept perfecting it. Whenever you went to Allen Hall and wanted to speak to Bernie, you had to kind of wait in line because he would talk so long with everyone. And he was again perfecting his rap. But he got a lot done. He was an early member, or I'm not sure, one of the founders of SPE.
He's among the founders.
Among the founders,
He was president.
Society for Photographic Education. And so I went on and got a degree in journalism. Like David said, it was in journalism those days. But then he switched over to fine arts, so I went back to school and got an MFA. And that was the start of my kind of quiet career.
With over 71 men shows.
Oh, is
You've
that
had, yeah,
Oh.
exquisite portraitist and our archivist. He's documented everything the whole time.
Yeah, I've stayed with photography at Oregon the whole time. And I'm generally the person that always has a camera in his hand.
But remember we used to hang those shows together, remember?
Yeah,
For like 10
I
years.
was the guy in charge for over a decade of putting the shows up on the wall, which is really a plum job because you get to open the box and see what's in there and arrange it on the wall. I guess Michael would know about that.
Yeah.
He did a nice job with this show.
We didn't even have
And
L brackets.
it wasn't, no, we didn't have L brackets. We had little 17 gauge nails, and we'd slip and little 1/4 inch piece of plastic tubing, and that's what we bend down to hold those prints in place.
The plastic tubing was model airplane fuel line, which we would get at the hobby store, which worked really well.
Yeah.
It was very affordable too. We had other people that tried to help us, but they cut themselves on the glass. Remember?
Well,
And we'd say,
In that 10-year span, I had several people that were helping me, and SUSIE was probably for the longest time, but there were several others as well.
Then finally Mark Clark took it over, remember?
Well, that's when I left. Then they wouldn't let anyone else from our committee touch it. I was okay.
Nothing happened, but they just decided they wanted it in-house. Mark did it.
Yes, well, he didn't want us out, but someone else did later. Anyway, that was 26 years. That was our first, I wasn't there for the very start. We're waiting for George to tell us about that. But I was there for, from mid-70s up till 92, which, no. What was the year we closed? Yeah, 92. 92 was the last year we were in our little space. It was a great little space because you'd be away, it was just a little room, and you'd be away from the giant halls of the museum, and you could really focus on those
But you could
pictures.
get 25 prints in there, remember? It was pretty good.
25? I thought it was only 20.
Yeah.
Or about 20.
Right
It
in there.
would be just enough to fill it up. But they were small prints. People didn't go overboard like they do today. George?
It was a dark space, a real dark space, and that was actually used one time in my memory to great advantage. It was to show, if you don't know him, you should look him up, W.G. Smith's work from World War II. And what we did, we put up a carousel projector, a Kodak carousel projector, that made a sound, chukung, chukung, chukung. And the images were just one at a time on a wall. So you walked in, and there was a certain amount of mechanization in World War II. And this machine was ka-chunk. And these beautiful, horrible photographs, the horror of the war that you captured, were going ka-chunk. Every second and a half. It was a beautiful one. I still remember that. That it was an experience walking in and seeing that work. And that slide projector, that Kodak.
That was early performance art, wasn't it?
Oh, it was the first installation that I know of at the museum. It was, actually. And it was that kind of imagination that Paul brought to hanging the various shows. I came in 1966 in time for the very first show, and actually, to promote myself a little more, designed the first announcement for the show. And this was before computers. So this is all handset type, or not handset, linotype type. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I'm not going to explain it. And this is all cut by me by hand, so it had to be very simple. They like to drink wine and beer. But I'm going to put this over by where the posters are so that you can take a look at it. And I've also brought, for you to look at the Commitment to Vision catalog that was done for the first anniversary of the show, the first 25 years of the show. And I'll leave that over there for you to take a look at if you'd like. And one other thing that I think is very important, if you don't bear with me a minute, I'll leave this over there for you to take a look at. But before I do that, I wanted to introduce my wife, Christy, who's on the phone. Donna Gilhausen, who's very, very important to the, wave your hand so they know who you are.
Yay, Donna.
One of Bernie's close friends, and probably his most, I don't want to say influential, but who kept inspiring to keep going, keep doing it, in spite of resistance from certain people on the faculty, certain people in the museum. And Bernie would visit him every year, and sometimes Merrill Armitage, who I'm talking about, would come up, and we called it holding court. And he would hold court. And Bernie's wife, Shirley, was a very gracious hostess to put up with Merrill, whose great refrain was, "Dear, my glass is empty." And anyway, This is the credo that Bernie followed. He had it framed in his office. Shirley gave it to us. And I'll put it over there so that you can read it.
Can you read it?
You don't want it.
Oh,
Listen,
right.
kids. This was dated November 1st, 1969. Listen, kids. When Rembrandt, Da Vinci, and Van Gogh go out of style, when people cease to read Shakespeare, Molière, Racine, Conrad, and Hemingway, when Louis Sullivan, Frank Lloyd Wright, and Mies van der Rohe cease to be great architects, and when Bach, Mozart, Schumann, Debussy, and Stravinsky are no longer played, then straight photography will be outmoded. I am not expecting any of these events very soon. But what makes my ass tired is that we have to listen to these little hiss ants and their imbecilic mouthings. They are just a little group of aspirants without talent who dodge the issue. Well, he put funking, but there's another word. That's in here. Funking up photography and setting it back a few years. What they are really doing is providing fertilizer, so real, true photography will thereby grow richer. After I've had my sister up here sometime this month, I will get into my little Maverick and point it towards Eugene, and then we will drink, they did do that, eat, and swap lies for a few evenings. I'll give you fair warning. In the meantime, get back to work, kids. Warmly, MORRILL Armitage. This is MORRILL's logo in the various bits. And if you don't know about MORRILL, you should, because he was everything. An art collector, art critic, one of the best book designers I've ever knew about. He was also an opera impresario. That means he put on opera. And he was one of the founders of the Hollywood Bowl, actually. They needed a venue to put something, and everything in Hollywood was taken up, and they said, what about this canyon? That was a Hollywood Bowl. But anyway, not to digress, MORRILL was a huge influence on Bernie. Not in his creative work, but in his ethic, if you will, and his inspiration to keep going, to keep working hard. Bernie died obviously too young, and it makes me sad every time I think about it. But the idea for photography at Oregon came from his work with the Society for Photographic Education. He became president of the society during its founding years, and it's one of the more prestigious and important groups in the teachings of photography. In fact, that first show is called The Professors of Photography. And once he had met these people from all over the country who wanted to form, if you will, a professors group of photography, and all of them were working photographers as well as teaching photography. He wanted to bring to the university and to the community in Eugene and Springfield, he wanted to show that diversity that was in the country on photography. And the best way to show that is to have an exhibit of the photography that was being done throughout the country. So he put on this show, curated it, if you will, and had a number of professors submit prints, and the show went up, and it was a huge success. It actually became a traveling exhibit and was taken apart, and pieces were sent to no matter what size space you had, parts would be taken apart to fit your space in places like La Grande, Klamath Falls. Schools and libraries were hungry for this kind of work. First of all, it was something new. It was photography, so to speak. And it was from all over the country, all over the world almost. And it was what was going on right now. And the group became much more dynamic than that and larger. But the photography stayed. And initially, the photography at Oregon committee was Bernie and me. And it was mostly Bernie, obviously, because all these shows were put on by people who knew him, from the photography to Society for Photographic Education, and personal friends like Ansel and Brett and some of the other people. Imogene Cunningham, I had the great pleasure of escorting Imogene Cunningham during one of our workshops. And it was like being in the Navy again. She had a good mouth. Describing certain people she didn't like. But that's a digression. Cute one though. And I'd be happy to answer any of your questions about any of these things when we have our question and answer period.
A lot of the artists that have shown were photography professors from SPE. And I go to those conferences every year. There are 500 photography professors that show up wherever the conference is. This year it was in Vegas. Next year it's in Orlando, Florida. It is sold out. It is 45 lectures over 3 days. It is openings. It is so jam-packed with information. It's just absolutely dynamic and inspirational. And I think that's what Bernie really wanted to bring to our town too, was the whole premise behind SPE and the kind of invigorating energy that could be expressed through showing this incredible work in a small town.
There was an important thing that happened that gave Bernie, if you will, tools to convince Wallace Baldinger and others that they should have this gallery, and that was there was a survey done in Lane County at the time, which surveyed people's interest, their occupation, their avocations, if you will, and their hobbies. And they were surprised by the finding that a serious avocation in Lane County, not a hobby, but an avocation, was photography, overwhelmingly. And so when he brought this to the museum to give, if you will, ammunition to have the gallery.
He also started a permanent collection there, and he convinced all his friends to sell their prints to the museum for like $50. So, you know, everybody sold the museum prints for $50. Ansel Adams, Meyer White, you know, all F-64 group, and now, you know, the museum has an incredible collection, largely due to Bernie's jumpstart. When we had the first Commitment Division show, we had a traveling show, and I solicited prints from that show and asked people. There were 128 photographers in that last show, and I think 42 of them donated their prints to the permanent collection at the university after the show was done touring. So we got another giant onslaught of images that were donated with our help. And then every year we raise money through our auction, which is in the fall, and we solicit donations from artists all over the country, and they donate their print and we auction it off. Well, a portion of those proceeds always went to buying a permanent collection edition, you know, buying a print that would go into the museum's collection every year. So we really tried to nurture that whole cycle of collecting, showing, giving people a first nice museum show whose work was really showing great promise. And we were proud that out of the 128 people in that catalog, over 80% of them made it big time in photography. And that was something that we were always very interested in, and I think we'll keep doing that. We want to bring back our Emerging Artists show and solicit portfolio submissions from around the country, jury it, and then show maybe 10 people's work, hopefully here at Maud Kearns, maybe every other year. And each artist would have 10 prints. And then we dovetail it with a nice show of archival prints from famous people that have shown during the gallery's long career. And it might be a wonderful juxtaposition of new and old, and keep photography very present in our community.
Well, speaking about community here, I'm pretty impressed that this room's full of people. So there's still a community of photographers and photography interested people here who kind of know about the importance of that media. And I think Eugene's come a long way since Bernie was almost by himself doing that, showing original prints in this town, because I think with a lot of the galleries who struggled to stay together, like New Zone and even White Lotus shows photographs at times. You know, there's a number of places you can see photographs regularly. And I think one good direction the PAO group has done is they started showing some films and kind of having gatherings where you can kind of casually look at films about photographers and talk more about what's going on and what you've seen lately. Because I think back to you know, in photo history, you know, in that time in the 1880s and 90s and 1910 and 20, photography groups were really important. That was kind of the one place where people could show their works to people who were interested in it. They could have discussions about what's good and what's bad, what is it compared to. And I hope that I hope that this kind of show and all these people who are around here can maybe gel together and kind of bring that to Eugene again, where there can be more activity, where there's some kind of community involvement in that. And Tony over there, here would be one great idea. Here's this wonderful new book that's been out just a few years, where there's, I think, about 60 essays by people, really short essays, just a couple pages, about photography has changed everything since it's been about in the 150 years it's been here. And you know, everybody to be able to read a book like this or something and come together and talk about it or something, to me, that would really kind of pull this group together and make it even more enlightening to stand in front of these kind of photographs, you know, because we would have discussions before and after that. So just an idea, because I'm real impressed with how there's a lot of people here who really care about photography, and this group could maybe specialize in showing works, and maybe somebody else showing traditional works. Maybe another group keeps showing things right at the fringe, brand new things, having Instagram feeds on their television screen in their windows or something. You know, just we need to experience photographs. We need to see photographs all the time. And when somebody has pre-selected some of them to make sure we see good ones, I think that's a real good way to kind of increase our education.
Roseanne Olson was saying when she came down from Seattle that Seattle has absolutely no photo community. They have no nucleus, they have very few events going on. For such a big city, there's just nothing going on, and it hasn't gone on for decades. And she said, Eugene is just so unbelievable. The commitment to the medium has been really impressive, and the longevity of your group, you know, us, and other groups like Photo Zone and Emerald Photographic Society, you know, each one of these groups have 50 and 100 people in them. And Photography at Oregon's a small group, we're just 12 volunteers, but it really is impressive for such a tiny town. You know, it's like our symphony, really good, but small, you know, so I'm proud of us. We've worked hard, and I think it's significant. And I think we realize what we've got here, and I hope we can continue it.
Well, I wonder if people have some comments or questions to add to this, and then I think after a certain point we might go around and pick out a photograph or two to talk about further. So, anybody have
any questions? I know it's hot out there. You can see people fanning.
Or anybody have stories about experiences you've had over the years with seeing a Photography at Oregon show, or maybe a photography show that's just really been meaningful to you?
I want to talk about what Michael's done with this exhibit. And one, not necessarily my favorite photograph, but my favorite corner in this whole exhibit starts with that big picture of the bridge and goes over to the other big picture of the bridge. And the way he's put that together, if you don't look at, try to understand these are photographs and not necessarily reality, especially black and white photographs, which are very, very abstract because they make you think they're real. But if you look at just the forms in each one, as you travel around and looking at each print, and don't stand and look at each one, just look at it and then go to the next and then go to the next, almost like a film, the way he's put it together. And he's guiding you through this entire exhibit. And I was just fascinated by the way he did that, because it's very, very difficult and very, very time-consuming. And that particular corner just resonated with me almost immediately as a designer, as a human being, as a guy who likes to look at pictures because I don't have to read them. To just go around and see that, you know, the way the forms repeat and lead you into the next picture, lead you into the next picture. He's done a masterful job.
No, this is a really well laid out show.
Beautifully put together.
Yeah.
I just want to give a compliment to Michael for that kind of
And George would know, he was the head of publications at the U of O for decades. How many decades was that?
Oh, too many. I did finally get to design the diploma. That was my goal for about redesign the diploma.
Good for you.
I ordered one.
One of my favorite areas is the juxtaposition of the Ruth Bernhard nude of the woman in the box, and then the Walter Chappelle abstract of the stream below that's called Torso. I thought that was really nicely done. Yeah, beautiful juxtaposition. Gene.
A number of photographers, in addition to the four of you up there, are Eugenians who have gone on to
Greatness.
very illustrious careers. How many are hanging here? There's Brian Lanker, and there's
Roseanne Olson.
and there are others. I think most of us know about Brian. You might say a word about Roseanne. She's doing some amazing things.
She does a little bit of everything. I mean, you see her quoted in popular photography. She shoots commercial work. She shoots commission work. I mean, she's really competent. And everything from fine art to commercial, very competent and gracious. And started at the RG, you know, friends with Brian Lanker, friends with John Bogus.
There are a
And
few
she was
other
at the
folks,
university.
a few other folks sitting right here who are Eugenians with work on the wall. Arden?
Yeah.
You wanna?
Where is Arden?
Right.
Oh, you're Arden.
I'm Arden.
I love your work.
Well, thank you.
I never knew.
Well,
And you sold, your piece sold.
yeah, I know, that's good. Kind of blew my mind.
Roseanne actually started photography.
He had the good sense to stay.
Yeah, taking it at Mount Kearns.
Yeah, well, I
Oh, yeah.
kind of invented a job at the Center on Human Development and kind of let my personal photography work rest. And I lost track of SPE, I lost track of all of that stuff. 'Cause when you're hot involved in designing things to help mentally retarded people function and you're working in various areas, you don't have time to really concentrate on doing shows. Now I'm free. Look out. Because I have a lot of things that have been cooking and haven't had a chance to put them together.
Now you have a little time to do that.
And I have time to do that.
Or comment.
Yeah,
Marcia.
I'm kind of interested in the leap that went on to take photography out of journalism and to consider it as a fine art in the museum. And I know that Bernie was really involved with that. Did he do that by involving the professors of photography, or kind of can anyone expand on how he pulled it out of journalism?
Well, the one thing that I remember is that going over from the art history department to Allen Hall on that second floor where all the big dark rooms were, everybody, you know, a lot of people had little cameras, but Bernie had a giant camera, and there were other people learning how to take large format photographs, and it was obviously he had a mind that was outside of the pure journalistic world.
And he had allies too over in the art school.
Yeah.
He had Dave Foster and.
Right,
we're
right,
working
good old
with-
Dave Foster.
My MFA is between the two of them.
Yeah. And then I remember, not only could you take kind of beginning photography and the dance and all that stuff, but he would offer these little seminars in that real dark paneled room in there about the philosophy of photography and the criticism of photography. You know, and those are things that are found in journalism school. You know, they're found over in the art department. And I'm sure his kind of expanding the vocabulary and the discussion about photography made him fit in better in the art department.
He was teaching photography as a form by which you can see and put together pictures, if you will, or other things as well, parts of life, if you will. And that's what he was teaching in the journalism school. He was hired by a dean. He worked in the photo bureau at the library, and one of the deans in journalism asked if he wanted to teach photography because they weren't offering any photography in the School of Journalism at the time. And he said, yeah. And he wasn't teaching journalism necessarily. He wasn't teaching art. He was just teaching a way to see if you're interested in something. And different students, some students might want to do an essay on let's say, a town called Alpine and talk about what is the cultural center of this little logging town north a little bit. And that was the Jim Cloutier now. And he was in the art school, but doing a journalistic essay on this community. And eventually he published, or a book was published on the town, and it's a beautiful, beautiful little book. And most of you know James. And so that was, he wasn't teaching journalism, he wasn't teaching art, he was teaching photography as a visual language. And that's what he wanted to teach. And people, quite frankly, people in journalism didn't understand it. Didn't care to understand it, because it's a very fine word school, if you will. And when the students wanted to have a gallery in Allen Hall, that as you went into Allen Hall and went up the stairs, you would see the pictures of what they were doing. And they put this show was put up every week. The students did it themselves. They had little clips, they could go put in pictures. And I swear that gallery, or that little stage, that show, did the most to move photography from journalism to art, because these professors, journalist school guys, would come and say, "This is a picture of a bridge. What's that got to do with it?" This is a picture of some guy, and they didn't understand what he was doing, teaching a visual language. And then he had friends like Bob James and David Foster, Albert Leon, who was in the Russian department, who loved photography, if you will, and understood it as a language. And they were very influential in moving the program over to the Department of Art, Department of Fine and Applied Art. At that time, I think it's renamed now. But as a language, not necessarily you're going to know art like painters. No, it was still a language, and that was David Foster's great. If you knew David, that was what he was teaching. This is a language. I remember there was a faculty show in the Department of Art, and we put up our pictures all over the place. And Foster brought a chalkboard, a series of chalkboards, and he drew on them every day. So this is what my art is teaching people, you know. And so it was that kind of creativity that Bernie really thrived in. And journalism eventually hired photographers who were photojournalists, if you will, and that made them happy. So there you go. And so it was those students that I thought moved it over with that gallery.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was always kind of schizophrenic to have Dave Foster on one side and Bernie on the other, and having to go back and forth between the two places to get everything you wanted to get to finish everything up.
Yeah.
And there was always.
I had that too. I had Bernie and Sherwin Simmons in art history and modernness. So, yeah. So, how many people have taken photography at the U of O? Is this kind of a lot of people here? Yeah. So you either knew Bernie or knew some of the people who followed it. You took a class with Bernie.
No,
You
I was
didn't?
past Bernie.
But you're in this
I
photograph.
mean, that's
you said.
Willie Osterman,
Yeah.
who was
You
down the
wanna talk
road
about that?
from, what is it, Bernie, and then Halberstadt, and then Willie,
And
pretty
Willie,
much.
yeah.
And Susie and I came in as young students. Willie was a graduate student. Halberstadt was the head of the department at that point. I think he was a lot like Bernie in some ways. I don't know. We missed Bernie when we got Halberstadt.
Bernie-
Willie was phenomenal. He
Yeah.
was the single best teacher I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah.
He could do anything, anytime. Wouldn't matter. That is actually a field trip.
Yeah.
And he just did this and that, and there's the photograph. It's the one of the cemetery. It was a field trip.
He's the head of the art department at RIT,
Yeah.
art photography.
One of the best places.
Most senior
It was a pretty
professor.
happening place when I started there,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
It really was. It's always stayed a small department.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
I did take a class from Bernie 3 months through, and I did so and declared myself a journalism major because of photography, in spite of the fact that I cannot spell or write.
Good for you.
I did not remain a journalism major. I was not successful there, but I did follow photography in the fine art department.
Great. What's your name?
Eric Brady.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I think Bruce McDonald was actually important at the U of O, even though he was photojournalism. He was my first teacher.
In Duncan McDonald.
Duncan McDonald.
Duncan McDonald, yeah.
Yes. He really helped with photography
Yeah, he did.
at the show.
Another thing Bernie did was lead a photography workshop every summer to the wild areas of Oregon or down to the southwest. And I managed to be on one of each of those kind of trips. When we went down to the southwest, we visited with MORRILL Armitage. It was mentioned here earlier. And we spent our longest time in Goldfield, Nevada, the Santa Fe Saloon in Goldfield, Nevada, which was kind of a retirement home for drunks, where they had lodging and they were allowed to drink as much as they wanted.
Didn't have to drive anywhere.
Retirement home.
But it was wonderful scenic areas that we drove through down there.
I did one in Oregon.
We did one workshop in the summer, actually that we inviting and having a 2-week workshop on the surviving members and also close people who knew about Group F-64. And Group F-64 was, it was called that because that's a very small aperture, makes real sharp prints, if you will, and most of these are on big cameras. And this was a group that was formed in what, the 30s? 30s, shortly after the, who got together in the Bay Area mostly, and was a group of Ansel Adams, Edward Weston, Imogene Cunningham, some other people, who mostly got together to drink and have a party. But they formed this group, and it became very influential in promoting photography as a fine art, without apology, if you will. Because at the time there was pictorialist groups who were wanting photography to look like paintings, and wanted them, not very good, very nice pictures, but they were fuzzy. That's why they came up with the moniker F-64. And so Bernie put on a workshop, inviting many of them back that were survived, that who were still alive. And it was a really fine workshop inviting these people back to talk about not necessarily those formative years, but talk about their vision, their commitment to vision, if you will, and what they wanted. Because all of them still work. I mean, you don't retire. They just work. You know, they keep working. They work more, so they work less. Either one, but they're still working. And photographers, you know, are for the most part, are very well read. So, to me, surprisingly so, because they have so much time devoted at that time to the darkroom, to taking pictures, getting out into the field, if you will. Edward Weston sitting in his studio taking pictures of bell peppers because he was waiting for people to come in and get their portraits taken. And so they had something to say, and the students loved it. They just, and of course, there were, you know, people butting heads, Ansel and MORRILL, they didn't like each other. They let you know it.
Do you think this teaching of the second language, you know, photography as a language, do you see evidence of that in the new world of digital, you know, YouTube and social media?
The way we taught photography, and it was from Bernie, he taught it as if you will, what he called a democratic art, in that it was available to everybody. And everybody could do it. Some people do it better than others, but everybody could do it. It was widespread. The only drawback, and I loved it, of course, was the darkroom. You know, but you could take it to Rexall and you get your film developed and prints made. We used to make jokes about that. Who's doing your photo finishing? Well, you know, the local drugstore. They did a very good job of it. But no, now with the computer, and with the digital imagery, if you will, you are seeing very fine photographs by unknown people. You see a lot of crap. That's true of writing. You see a lot of crap in the bookstore, but you see very fine things too. And if you look on the computer and I don't know, you're just clicking through and you see, wow, you know, somebody did that, and it wasn't me. But it is widespread as a language. You know, they're doing not just nice pictures. Nice pictures are nice, but they're doing very stunning work that's intricately designed or beautifully simple, and it's on the computer coming out all there, and people print it. You know, people are buying 11-17 printers at home. I said, what are you doing that for? You using Word or what? Lots of big words? No, they want to pick their picture. So it is a language that almost, in spite of the educational system we have, in spite of that, people are developing their visual language. If you get information really fast, visually, boom, it's there. It's, David Foster, who was a great teacher in the School of Art, teaching graphic design, used to say, like, the visual language in kindergarten and on up is, like, taught by the kids coming through, and it's an elective, and then when you get to, like, the 5th grade, they take it away. And they're no longer teaching the visual arts. It's an elective, and so they're teaching themselves. These kids have to teach themselves just by what they see and how they want to express themselves. I don't know if that answers your
That's a
question.
very good answer.
I think so too.
I have one more question. How did Imogen Cunningham come to take that iconic photo of Maud Kearns? How did they run into each other? Anyone know?
I don't know.
She took the famous pictures of the flowers when she had children, because she couldn't get out into the field anymore. And thank God for those children. Those are some of the beautiful photographs I've ever seen.
I have beautiful children portraits too. Photographed her kids a lot.
You can buy the pictures when they put on these workshops at the university, like Brett would come and he'd have a show, and you could buy the picture for $25. Ansel, you could buy an answer for $25. Bring them up. He would print the same one, and usually a contact print, because those were easier to print, and you could make like 50 of them really fast.
Any more questions? I'll ask any questions. I'd like to thank all of the members of Photography at Oregon very, very much for this opportunity. The staff, the board, the volunteers are all very, very proud of the show. We're excited to be able to share the show with this community. So thank you very, very much.
In a farming community with her neighbor. Her neighbor had come over for a cigarette, and it showed just the kind of camaraderie that they had for one another as friends. It was really lovely. Her house had a dirt floor. She had lots of animals running around, and as a favor, I warmed all of her animals, and then started talking with her a little bit, and made a series of portraits of her in her home. And just a lovely person. They live a very simple lifestyle. There's no insulation or anything, and these are basically like cotton picker shacks from the last 100 years. And everything's just stacked or hung from a nail on the wall. The image really shows just a raw kind of a beauty. Okay. I love this image of the Cuban soldier on duty next to the giant statue of Jesus who's covered in scaffolding getting a facelift. The soldier was very relaxed, and guard duty is not too serious of a post. In fact, the next image that I made of the guy, he was curled up on the bench taking a nap underneath the statue of Jesus, which I really liked.
Okay.
This guy was a street beggar, basically. He represents a lot of the medical concerns that are going on in Cuba at this time. He probably had some sort of an injury to his legs or a bad infection, and you see a lot of amputees there. You realize they do not have a lot of sophisticated equipment and or ICUs, etc. And people get alterations in order to survive in a serious kind of an emergency situation. Now this guy would probably get state support that would be more like $35 a month so that he could be able to not have to work. Super nice guy, not resentful at all, glad for what he had, happy to be alive. This shot is of a grandmother with her granddaughter, and I love the candid kind of beauty the two of them have. There are lots of imperfections. They're showing their humanness for sure, but you can tell how much the woman adores her granddaughter, and you can see how shy her granddaughter is. And things like the grandma didn't have a chance to put her teeth in, and the little girl didn't have a chance to pull her shirt down. But they look so great, and I love the framing of the door and all the wrought iron work on either side. Just their gesture and expression really illustrates a lot about the quality of relationship. So this was a Cuban bride getting married on New Year's Day in the Plaza de San Francisco in Havana in January of 2013. And I was in the plaza photographing all different kinds of people and activities. And this wedding was really stunning. And so I followed the wedding party around getting their formal images made. And at the end of their session, she acknowledged that I had been following them and just appreciating how truly stunning she looked in her wedding gown. She had flown in from Russia for the event and had a special day, and I like the juxtaposition of her against the Spanish church, which was built in the 1600s.
Muerto en todas mis ilusiones.